Hello. How y'all doing? Are y'all good? Good. Well, thank y'all for coming in. You need anything? Y'all doing good. Great. Thank y'all. Well, the call for me into the restaurant industry I really kind of fell into it. I was in high school, was a freshman in high school. My brother was running a restaurant in Columbus, Mississippi, and I just started working for him and bussing tables and washing dishes, doing a little cooking, and just really ended up feeling comfortable in it. It felt like a place I like to be and things I like to do. I enjoyed serving people and working with others, and it was just a good environment for me. And I did that throughout high school and college, and continued through. It became a career for me. I moved up and did most of the positions in the restaurant, and eventually started managing. And I really enjoyed the interaction with the employees and trying to learn how to better motivate people to do what we needed to do, take care of the customers and our guests that came in. During my college years, I was a typical college student, or fairly typical. Liked to enjoy myself, went out and played a lot and everything. And there was a point, I think I was probably around 20 or so, that I just felt God's calling that I need to get a little more serious about life and get a little more engaged in a church and spend more time with Him. And as I did that, I even got more comfortable in the position I was in and the role I was making. And then I started realizing what kind of impact I could have on others just through the relationships I built in the restaurant industry, and the fact that I realized not only were the people I was managing and working with were there to meet some end, but I was also there to help develop them and prepare them for life, and hopefully be a good example and show them Christ through my actions. Yvonne, how are you doing? You making a little tea?
Yes.
All right. Yvonne's been with us. I call her Yvonne. She's Yvonne, but I call her Yvonne. She's been with us a long time. They're actually two different stretches. That's right. I really do believe God ordered things so. The best way to put it would be, He ordered things so He could be praised, He could be worshiped, He could be recognized in everybody's actions and everything they do. That, if you're good to the people that work with you, they're going to respond well, and they're going to work better, and they're going to produce more, and they're going to enjoy coming to work. And, just having a positive outlook, and just simple things as, being nice when somebody walks through the door, checking on people when they're out sick, celebrating important parts of people's lives, birthdays, anniversaries, and then being there for them when maybe not so good things happen. And then they're there for you and for the business. And again, I tell people, nobody works for me. They work with me. We all work for our customers. That's where our income comes from. And so a mindset of, I'm no better than the newest dishwasher that came on board with us. If dishes are not clean, it doesn't matter what I do on the other end. I can run all kind of reports and do all kind of meetings, but if dishes and silverware are not clean, then we're not going to have guests coming through the door. So I just think, I believe Jeremiah says, pay. In Jeremiah it says, you should pay your workers a fair wage. There was a king that wasn't, I can't remember his name. I wouldn't pronounce it correctly anyway. But that in Jeremiah they were talking about that, how he wasn't treating his people fairly, And so it really is just creating a family environment, a church is a family environment, but your work can be a family environment. Your softball team can be a family environment, and that's how you get the opportunity to show Christ in the way you act, and accept people where they are and where they are in life. We may be a step farther ahead of some people in their walk with Christ, but there's a lot of people that are steps ahead of me, and I need their help as much as I need to help the people that maybe I'm a step or two ahead. And so just not thinking of employees as some means to an end of making money, but as someone that God has given you the opportunity to interact with and have an impact on, and they have an impact on you, and then everybody works well together and things work out great. I mean, I just think God ordered it that way, and a positive, upbeat, uplifting environment. And even part of that at times is holding people accountable. It may not be, God holds us accountable. And I tell the story, my brother fired me once. And I deserved it and needed it, and I matured from it. And so even sometimes it may not be fun, or it may not be, I've never enjoyed having to terminate an employee, but also it is something that first I owe it to the other people that work with us to hold people accountable, but I do believe that it will help people develop in life. Even when we all go through tough times and make mistakes. The first Friday that we were shut down after COVID blew up, my faith was tested. These businesses are almost like children to me, and you put a lot of time, sweat, energy, money, resources into them, and I pulled up here the first Friday that we were only doing curbside, and it was Friday night at about 6 o'clock, and I was the only car in the parking lot. And what really bothered me was we had 4 servers inside working for tip wages, and they, obviously they weren't making any money. And as they came out and serviced me and gave me my meal to go, it just really made me realize I wasn't the only one in this boat, and that I was going to have to be one of the people that steps up and says God's in control and has got this, and we're going to be fine. I'd like to say right at that moment, I took that challenge to myself and forward straight ahead, but it took a little time. It was, I was questioning how God had let this come to this place, because as soon as I pulled out of the parking lot and I drove down the road, I realized every business to my left and right, every car I passed, everybody else was going through the exact same thing and dealing with the exact same issues. And so that's probably one of the biggest challenges. But we just put one foot in front of the other. We prayed about it. We tried to do the right thing with all of our employees. Unfortunately, we had to lay off about 2/3 of our employees at the time. Tried to give them the resources they need. Did some other things to try to make it the separation as easy as possible. And we ended up doing more volume in curbside than we thought we would have to, and we did more volume in curbside and to-go than we thought we would, and had to bring more employees back on. And you could just see God's hand in it, that we were going to be okay, And I am a firm believer that, something that says in the Bible, that you got to prepare for famine. You have to be ready for famine. It's coming. This isn't the last time we're going to see it, and people are going to see it in different ways and different shapes and different forms in their lives. We just all live this together. And so you've got to be prepared for famines. It's coming. It's going to be there. And our company is a pretty conservative company that was always prepared for hard times, because they happen every 3, 4, 5, 6 years as the economy rolls. We weren't quite ready for this one, but we were fairly well prepared, and God, through teaching us through that wisdom of being prepared for a famine, did get us through it fairly well, and we're back to really a level of business that was as good or better than before, and our employees are very appreciative of work and being out and interacting with people, and it's another really great opportunity through this time to be there for each other. How are y'all doing?
Hi, we're good.
Good. Has somebody been by your table yet?
Yes.
Okay, great. The point that I realize that this is why we are here and why God put us here, or, there's been multiple ones, but one in particular was when we just fed the front lines people at the hospital. When this thing was crazy and they were working crazy hours and risking their lives before there was a vaccine, and they're all masked up and screened up and clothed up, and and we delivered food to them, and you would have thought we sent them boxed lunches, but you would have thought we brought them all 5-star meals and all kind of great food, and they were just so appreciative, and you could just feel us working with them, helping them in their need while they're helping others in need. And we didn't do it for publicity. We didn't do it for anything but to do something good for people that are really literally risking their lives. And you could just feel the community coming together in all kind of aspects. You know, the food service industry providing meals and what they were doing at the hospital, and the resources that local government was trying to give us, and just tons of people reaching out, and it was amazing how patient people got, you know, and understanding that, you know, we're just trying to get this together, and it's amazing how crisis like this, and 9/11's another example of that, of how we all come together during difficult times. And I think God shows us we really should be like this all the time. But then again, we don't need Him during the good times. It seems we only turn to Him when it's tough. But He was there. But to me, that was just the interaction with the frontline people at North Mississippi Medical Center was one of those times that really made me feel good about what we were doing and why we were here. You're sitting there wondering what has happened to my business, but maybe my business needs to be used for different purposes, and that again goes back to being there for the people that you're working with and your community, and just trying to be Christ in person, and doing the small things and the big things maybe that make a difference in people's lives and make them start questioning their faith and whether they need to take some time, as I did when I was 19 or 20 years old, and reflect on where they are in life and really what all this means. Because, you know, 100 years from now, this restaurant really isn't going to matter much, you know, but the lives that we touch are, and their children and grandchildren and generations to come. That's what matters. You know, my brother was a major impact to me, and he's a really good man. And my father died when I was young, so he's 7 years older than I, so the relationship is a little different. We're brothers, but I look up to him as a father figure, and he's always set a good example. And we've just always tried to do the right thing with our business. You know, we've just tried to. Not that we've always done the right thing, but we've tried to do the right thing. And so he's had a major impact on me. You know, of course, you're limited in a business setting of how much you can talk about and those type things. But really, it's just the way you act. You know, you're just looking, you know, this person is different, the way he or she acts and interacts with people. And that, you know, that is the opportunity we have in the work environment. And of course, there's people that open up the door for you can talk to, and I want to guide, you know, I want to guide mainly the younger people here, but some people my age and maybe even older, to avoid some of the best mistakes to learn from are somebody else's. And I've made plenty of them, and so in their life experiences, and you got to know the people that are around you to be able to do that. If you don't know what's going on in their lives, there's no way you can help guide them at all, or give them advice or counsel, or point them in the right direction, or maybe help them find somebody else that's a little more prepared to deal with whatever they're dealing with, and have those resources at hand to be able to get people the help that they actually need. But it's mainly just being there for your people and having, it's kind of a cliche, but an open door policy. People have got to feel comfortable coming to you to talk about what's going on in their lives. Do we really mean it? We're here for you. We want to help you. And in return, it goes back to that. You end up with a better work environment, a happier employee, people more productive. You take better care of our guests who pay us. Everybody makes more money, and it's just kind of a, you know, again, I go back to what I started with. I think just God ordered it that way, that you just treat people the way you want to be treated. I tell people that, unless you like to be yelled at, you know, don't do that. But just treat people the way you want to be treated, and it will be reciprocated if you do. It's my goal in life to help shepherd people along, encourage people along, be a positive influence in people's lives, you know, and realize that every interaction I have with everybody I come in contact with makes a difference. And it doesn't matter if it's here at work or if it's at the bank or if it's the grocery store. We put off a vibe, and it needs to be a good vibe and a Christian vibe. And one thing we do not tolerate is bad attitudes, and because it's so contagious. And we're in the hospitality business, and I can walk right out there right now and ruin everybody's day, or I can make their day better. And I want to be that person that made your day better. Now, that doesn't mean I do not pull you over and talk to you about areas you need to work on or things you need to focus on. We all have them. But it's how I do that that makes the difference, not that I do it, and that we're pointing out what's right first and not what's wrong first. People are going to hear you when they get some praise. The old saying, A's need praise. And so people that perform need to hear they're performing well, and those that don't need to be coached along, but in a positive, upbeat, considerate manner. And so I guess for me, and I've rambled on here a little bit, would be that just everybody I come in contact with can feel Christ and can see that I genuinely care about them, and they're not just some ends to a means, and that they mean something. I told Brian once that, the closer I get to God, the more I can see people's souls. And the farther I get away from them, the less I can see people's souls. And they become that ends to a mean or some instrument I need to do something. And so it's whether it's that person at the pickup counter at Walgreens or in meeting people where they are and understanding that they've got a lot going on. People are under a lot of pressure right now, and patience is so important for us as Christians right now, to be patient with each other, and especially patient with those that are not Christians, because we want them to have what we have, but we've got to be different.
Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. "Zacchaeus," he said, "quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today." Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. "He is going to be the guest of a notorious sinner," they grumbled. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, "I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much." Jesus responded, "Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who were lost."
Well, here we are 4 weeks into our series where we've been talking about these different gifts that God gives us if we are Jesus followers. We've talked about apostle, we've talked about prophet. A lot of these are big words that are sort of like churchy words. I'm here with my friend Devin. Devin is our Northside campus pastor. Is that your specific title?
Senior pastor of Northside. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
No big deal.
he is the lead pastor at one of our sites. And we're talking about the role of the evangelist. So it's another big sort of churchy word. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have connotations about what that is.
That they do.
What's an evangelist? Like when we're talking about the specific gift, what's an evangelist?
Okay, so the way that I've been describing it, I think an evangelist is best understood in relationship to an apostle. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna explain that. So what Jesus did was when he came on the scene, he identified that there's a great harvest of lost sheep. Mm-hmm. Now that's a very churchy thing to say, but in layman's terms, there's a lot of people who don't know who Jesus is, and that's the gap, right? Mm-hmm. That's what an apostle does. They're able to recognize gaps, and then an evangelist, they will pick up right there. That's where evangelist's heart comes in. It's like, okay, there's a lot of people who don't know who Jesus is, so are we bringing those people into relationship with him? Yeah. That's at the core of what an evangelist does.
Yeah. So earlier we read that Zacchaeus story. Uh-huh. So what is that? We're at all our sites in person. We're teaching this story in light of the gift of being an evangelist. So what do those two things have in common? Why are we teaching this story when it comes to like the evangelist part?
Right. Yeah. So again, so Jesus has identified a gap. there are people out there who don't know who he is, and then when we get to the story of Zacchaeus, that he is the embodiment of someone who doesn't know who he is. Zacchaeus, he's a tax collector, a chief tax collector, and he's working for the Roman government. The Jewish people do not like him because the Roman government is oppressing their own people, and he's working for them to help further that along. He's deepening the pockets of the Roman government, basically. And so he's a crook. He's filthy rich, and it's evident by the way that he's living that he doesn't know who Jesus is. And so what he does is he hears Jesus is coming, and he finds himself in a tree because he has to see. He can't miss this moment. He just wants to get a glimpse of Jesus. And then when Jesus is walking by and he sees Zacchaeus in the tree, that's where Jesus is functioning as an evangelist, because he knows there's someone close by who does not have a relationship with him, and he cannot let it go, because his heart is everyone coming into a relationship? Is everybody going to be invited into this kingdom? So that's one aspect where he is functioning as an evangelist, because he can't just leave Zacchaeus in the tree.
Yeah.
But also, evangelists are very invitational. So what he does is he offers him to come down, and he asks if he could be a guest at his house. So not only are they invitational, they're really good at meeting people where they are. So he goes to a place where Zacchaeus is comfortable, and yeah, so that's how he's functioning as evangelist in that moment.
And that's sort of like a controversial thing for him to do that, for Jesus to do that, because, like you said, he's hated. Tax collectors, they essentially stole from their own people, because
Right.
they had to take what Rome wanted in tax, but they could take whatever that's why they were rich, because
Exactly.
they're like, oh, say the Romans want 10%, I can take 30% and keep the other 20 for myself, and
Right,
that's why they
exactly.
were rich.
Mm-hmm.
So and to go over to someone's house was like a big deal, right? It's a way of like recognizing them, respecting them, honoring them. So Jesus not only like seeks out Zacchaeus and says like he doesn't know me, he needs to know me, but he does it in a way that's like controversial for his time. It's like, and I think that's really important for us to look at too, is that, like an evangelist a lot of times will go to people who a lot of times the church is like, I don't know, like
Exactly.
they're a little sketchy or whatever.
Right, yeah.
So evangelist is a term that it's very close to the word like evangelical, which in today's sort of like modern, at least in the U.S., like the context that we use that word sometimes, it's very like polarizing in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we? I've been thinking about this, so this is maybe you haven't, but like, how do we separate the gift of evangelist, which is like a God-given gift that we all embody, and some people embody specifically, from sort of like the baggage of like that term evangelical that has to do with, sometimes with like politics or specific worldviews. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think you said it. I think the problem is that we've been going about how we define evangelists from a human perspective, and that's kind of taken the narrative. But if we go all the way back to the beginning of the series, Ephesians 4, Jesus is the full embodiment of each and every one of these. He's the one who gave us these gifts, which means, and the push at the end of Ephesians 4 is to grow in maturity. So if we are going to talk about how we truly act as evangelists, then we've got to go to the source. We've got to see how Jesus functions as an evangelist. And once we're able to see how Jesus functions as an evangelist, then we can grow and mature in that area. But also, I think the problem is, especially with the negative connotations in the wrapping, is evangelists have gone off on their own. Not that they're not naturally gifted in that way. It's just they have no one reining them in.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important for us to mature. And maturing means maturing in the fullness of image of Jesus, which is all these giftings.
Yeah.
So evangelists can very much get in their own little lane, and they almost spew hate.
Yeah.
Because they're so guilt-stricken because they want people to know who Jesus
Yeah.
is, but hate comes out. That's where you need a shepherd around. It's like, hey, we're supposed to love these people.
Yeah.
That's how we can go.
They kind of
about
like
this.
bully everybody else out of the way.
Yeah,
rather
exactly.
than-
Or an apostle to come in. It's like, hey, well, you've forgotten the whole vision here. Like, this is the heart. This is why we do what we do. You do need to reach lost people, but there's a way to go about it.
Yeah, we talked very early on about how all of these gifts work together, and evangelists might be part of the reason. Maybe this is what you're saying. Like, part of the reason why evangelists is they're so passionate and so fervent that it's hard sometimes maybe for them to see where they fit in the broader picture because they're so fervent about like bringing people into the kingdom.
Right, exactly. And that is a place, because if you're thinking about the whole body here, the evangelists are kind of outliers. They are out. And if you're talking about feeling like they're kind of on their own, that's probably a weight that they feel. They're like, am I the only one out here doing it? No, it's just where you are in that, in the grand scheme of things.
I don't. Well, were you? Was evangelist like high on yours? Is
I
that
am.
Like,
Yeah, that's
you
my
are.
top.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, talk about maybe some personal experience you've had with other people who've shown this gift to you, or maybe how like that impacts you as someone has the heart of an evangelist.
Yeah. So it feels real braggy just to talk about yourself, But I think
that's why I asked.
Thanks. Yeah,
So,
I
I
love
want you to
talking about
brag, yeah.
myself. Now, something that an evangelist can bring to the table is in any situation, in any moment, in any past moment, they can see how Jesus is moving and how God is moving, and they can relate it in a way that just other people who aren't naturally gifted in that way can. So just take my sermon writing. I have no problem taking a text, and I can pinpoint any story in my life or anything that's happened, and I can just bring it and tie it in naturally because I can easily see that. And that is something that an evangelist can do. They naturally just see the way Jesus is moving and how the brokenness and the lost people, how they can make that connection. Like you're feeling this way, and I know you're feeling this way, and I know how to connect that back to how we can fix that brokenness.
Yeah.
So that's how I've seen it played out, especially in sermon writing. But also, we're just naturally drawn to hanging out with people who aren't inside the church.
Yeah.
That's just how an evangelist works and operates.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I think the Zacchaeus story is a specific instance of that.
Exactly.
But one of the things we see about Jesus all the time is he was continually, part of the reason why he was at odds so much with people who were religious was because his evangelical heart took him to people who were outside of the church that the people were like, I don't know.
Right.
And I think one of the things in today's culture that we do is like, it's so polarized, it's so tribal, we get into our lanes, and as church people, a lot of times we can say, all right, these are my people, and I want to be around my people, but that's so antithetical to the gospel that like, this is why, and I'm kind of leading in, I maybe even answering this question is like, what do you say to someone who has sort of that evangelical heart? Like, how do they use their gifts in line with the church, and why is it important in the church? Maybe I kind of stepped over by sort of like going there, but
no. So that's something. Even studying the Zacchaeus text, and there are people who do that right in the text. They grumble because he's hanging out with a notorious sinner, and I just realized I was like, evangelists are naturally gifted at realizing that they too were once lost. Which is huge. So self-righteousness is almost like the anti-evangelist because they recognize that they too were once lost, and so they want people not to feel like that. So that's one thing. And if you are an evangelist within the church, what you bring to the table is you keep the church outwardly focused. The church can become very inwardly focused, and there's a place for that. And there's room for that, but that is just not the heart of an evangelist, and you need them all, again. So if you have an evangelist, they're out bringing new people in because they know what it was once like to feel lost, and they don't want anybody else to feel like that. And they're just constantly pushing the people to, hey, there's more people out there. How do we reach those more people so we can keep growing this and disciple, and how you can get teachers, somebody to disciple, that's how it works.
Yeah, so what if you're not someone who like scores kind of high on, if you took that assessment and quiz and you know that that's like a gift that you have, but it's not high on your list. So how do I nurture that in my own self and in people around me? Like how do I make space for that in the church?
Get out of the church.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be the number one way, because if you are affiliated with a church and you hang out with people who aren't in the church, there's going to come a point where they're going to ask you, it's like, what is this whole Jesus thing about? And then you're going to have to answer the question. And when you have to answer the question, you're going to grow in evangelism, because you're going to realize that you're going to say things that they're not going to understand. So you're going to have to work on how to be relatable. You're going to have to work on how to say it in ways that they understand. And if you are an evangelist at heart and don't have I don't want to say don't have a relationship with Jesus, you're not plugged into a church, that's an advantage because you're in your own little corner of the community and you're already outside of the church and you're able to grow in it. And also, I would encourage you to find somebody who is high in evangelism and bring them with you and just hang out with them outside of the church.
Yeah, I think that's, I keep going back to that Zacchaeus story, but I think sometimes when we picture evangelists, we think, like, I grew up with a guy in Memphis who ended up becoming like a street preacher.
Right.
He would be like down in Beale Street telling everybody they're going to hell with big signs and all that kind of
exactly.
stuff. So that's probably not the best way to evangelize people.
No.
But what Jesus doesn't do that. He goes and, like, all he does is ask Zacchaeus, like, come down from the tree, let's go eat. That's a really interesting way of evangelizing somebody, because a lot of times I think if we grew up in the church specifically, or a lot of us grew up in the South, so we grew up in church culture. So we think evangelizing is sort of that. Even if we wouldn't be as brazen as like street preachers, we'd be like, I gotta tell somebody about Jesus right now. But you can't do that outside of a relationship. That's kind of what I hear you saying. It's
Yeah,
like, you gotta
exactly.
get to know people.
Yeah, meet people where they are. And I think that's where the street corner fails. You're trying to invite them into your world, but you really need to step into theirs.
Yeah.
So you can relate it in a way that they understand.
Yeah.
You can't relate something to people you don't know.
Yeah. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, man. I
Thanks.
enjoyed this.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus. dressed in